How likely is a Russian invasion of Ukraine?
Well, I think as the Defence Secretary has said over this weekend, over the last couple of days, actually, we have to be realistic about, with Russia having 100,000 troops now roughly on the border there, that an imminent incursion by Russia is entirely possible. And that's why we've changed the travel advice and the advice we've given to UK citizens who are in Ukraine.
Do you think that the reference to Munich is that helpful in a diplomatically sensitive moment?
Well, I think what Ben has outlined there is given an explanation that people understand, particularly in the context of if people have seen the new movie recently, in the sense of in the run-up to World War II, of course, there was lots of diplomatic work. People thought that was progressing, but of course it turned out not to. And I think what the Defence Secretary quite rightly is doing is drawing the comparison and being clear that there's a lot of diplomatic work going on. Obviously, both he and the Foreign Secretary have been in Russia themselves this week. The Russian state is saying that it is not planning to invade, but when you then have 100,000, now 130,000 we estimate troops on the border, that would indicate that there is a possibility of an incursion. So it's that balance and that decision and that interpretation of the difference between what we hope will be a diplomatic outcome, but the realistic possibility that something much more tragic could occur.
But I suppose one might say it's not that tactful to make the associations with Nazis.
Well, that's not the point, actually, the Defence Secretary was making. Let's be very clear, but what he was drawing was the comparison between the diplomatic attempts in the run-up to World War II and the diplomatic attempts we're all putting in now. We want to see a diplomatic outcome, we want to see a peaceful outcome to this, but we do have to be cognizant of the fact, as you said quite rightly in the outcome, the quote by Winston Churchill is probably as true today as it was back then in the context of diplomatic talks with 130,000 troops sitting right there on the border. And with that kind of accumulation, there is always the possibility and the ability for Russia to move very, very swiftly and very quickly should it decide to do so, which obviously we hope they won't.
Well, there is a school of thought, of course, that says that actually he's not really going to do this. But what he has done, bear in mind that Russia is at best a middle-ranking economic power. It's got a lot of armed forces, but not as much as some. But he has achieved a pretty spectacular strategic victory already by exposing some deep fault lines in the West and essentially having everybody dancing to his tune.
Actually, I think what he has done is bring the West, NATO and the European alliance together to show that we're not prepared, and nobody should be prepared to see a country, a democratically run country, have its borders threatened in that way, and to be very clear that the world is not going to put up with that. And we need to see a diplomatic outcome to this and a peaceful outcome. But putting threats like that on an independent country is just inappropriate.
But he knows that, in truth, we've said that we would not put soldiers into Ukraine, that we would support them in whatever way we can, but essentially this is another example of the West's failure to stand up to Russian aggression. We can go back as far as Hungary in 1956, Czechoslovakia in 1968, or, frankly, don't have to go back that far, Crimea 2014. He's done it before.
Well, it may well be that President Putin is testing the boundaries where he can go. And I think that's why it's been important that the West, and I have to say, the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, the Defence Secretary, the UK as a whole have been leading the way in bringing that alliance together to be very clear to Russia that this is not something we will tolerate. We do want to see a peaceful outcome to this, but NATO is very, very clear that it is right that a democratic, independent country like the Ukraine is allowed to continue as an independent, democratic country without this kind of bullying or threats from a state like Russia.
Well, it may be a great alliance, but some people will say that's just an alliance of impotence.
Well, actually, no. I think at the moment, what we're seeing Russia has said over the last few days in the meeting they had with Ben Wallace, that they are not looking to invade. If we can avoid that and we have a diplomatic outcome, then it will have been successful. But I think it's also right that the West working together is very clear that should Russia take a different course of action, that there will be repercussions for that, because it cannot be acceptable that an independent state, a democratic state, has that kind of threat put upon it, let alone that kind of incursion should it happen.
Well, let's talk about the possibility of deterring him if he's pausing. You said that the West is united, but it's not entirely right, is it? For example, we know that the EU's banks have an exposure to Russia of over $60 billion. That's 4 times the exposure of American banks. So the Americans can afford to make threats, but the EU may be more cautious. And surely that is actually what Mr. Wallace is talking about, that our EU partners may be a bit less willing than the United States to take the tough deterrent steps against Mr. Putin and his allies by cutting off their supplies to money and so on?
Well, obviously, we're not in that position yet, so we'll see what the outcome is. Well, no, I mean,
that's
in terms
interesting.
of
Why aren't we in that
in
position already? Why aren't we taking steps already
Trevor,
to put the squeeze on him?
Well, no, Trevor, we've been very clear. We will bring in more sanctions. That's one of the repercussions there will be.
Yeah, but my question is, why are we waiting?
We already have some sanctions against Russia already. We've already taken the power in the last week or so with the statutory instrument in Parliament to allow the UK government to put more sanctions in place. Look, I spent most of last week in the United States, predominantly on Northern Ireland business for the UK government, but what is very clear, the United States are absolutely unified in this approach to ensure that we do not see an incursion, and should Russia take that kind of activity, that there will be repercussions. And that's one of the things we've been very clear with Russia about. And to be fair, so have our partners across Europe as well.
Well, our own Parliament hasn't been very convinced of our fortitude in this. The Intelligence Security Committee, 18 months or more ago, said Russian influence in the UK is the new normal. Successive governments have welcomed the oligarchs and their money with open arms, providing them with a means of recycling illicit finance through the London laundromat and connections at the highest levels with access to UK companies and political figures. Now, look, we've been saying for years now we're going to clamp down. Actually, Russian billionaires are still whacking their money through London's banks. We haven't actually done anything to hurt Putin.
Well, I disagree with that. I have to say, look, before I was in this role, I was the security minister. And one of the things I know, without going into, there's kind of areas that I can't really talk about in terms of security intelligence. We as a country, not only do we already have sanctions against Russia in place, actually as a country, I think we're in a position where we've done phenomenal work over the years so that we're not that kind of venue. We are an attractive place for the world's money and the world's businesses to invest and to trade. That's a good thing for the City of London. But we do have things in place, whether it's unexplained wealth orders and a whole range of other measures that mean that we are somewhere that deters the kind of illegal activity that you refer to. And I have to say, if you look at some of the famous names around the world that people talk about in terms of that kind of Russian activity, this is not a country that they spend time in, it's not a country they come to. And I do think we have those measures in place to protect our institutions.
Well, they don't have to come here. They can, they can stay in Monaco or whatever it is, but their money is here. And I'm curious about this because Liz Truss, when she was sitting where you are sitting a week or two ago, said to me that you're going to introduce new legislation that will give you greater powers to confiscate the assets of these people and put pressure on Putin. If actually we've been so successful so far, why do you need new legislation?
Well, because, look, that's actually quite simple, Trevor. Yes, we have. We have things like, as I say, unexplained wealth orders is one of the tools in our armoury that we can use, and the security services, the police services do use that. It's been very successful. It's actually one of the things that Ben Wallace brought in when he was security minister. But we're always looking at how we reassess. As financial markets move, as technology moves, you've always got to keep these things under review to make sure that you are able to have the tools that you need to deal with what people are trying to do. It's the same with fraud and internet activity more generally. These things are always moving, they're always developing, and it's right that our teams keep that under review. And that's partly why, even just last week, we've taken the power to bring in more sanctions should we need to do so. That's something that the teams are looking at the moment to make sure that if we need to do that, we have the ability to do it and do it in a way that actually has impact.
All right, let's talk about your own response with Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is right now without a First Minister or a Deputy First Minister. I understand you're just back from Washington, where I gather that you've been talking about this to officials there. What were you hoping to achieve in your trip to America? Well,
it was a long-planned trip, actually. It was around a range of issues, just generally about and I was in both Washington and Boston, about the investment that the US has generally had in Northern Ireland, business investment, which is hugely important as part of delivering prosperity, and that's part of the peace process, is seeing jobs and opportunities created, and particularly with the burgeoning cyber and technology sector in Northern Ireland, there's huge US interest in that. So looking at how we bolster that, how we do more on that, how we develop that, but also talking to our friends and colleagues in the United States to make sure that they're aware of our position on the Northern Ireland Protocol. The US have a huge interest in what happens in Northern Ireland, their emotional attachment, their involvement in the Good Friday Agreement. They've been a key player in Northern Ireland over the years, and make sure that they understand what are the problems with the Northern Ireland Protocol and what is it we envisage as a way through this.
Well, indeed, you talked about the emotional attachment of the Americans and the President Biden, himself of Irish heritage, was clear in his election campaign that there would be no trade deals until the protocol issue is sorted out. Were you able to get them to budge on that?
Well, actually, the Secretary of State for International Trade, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, is going to the US just in the next few weeks to continue the discussions about trade deals. One of the things I do find the US see us as a hugely important, obviously one of their strongest allies in the world. They're keen to trade with us, to look at what more we can do around global trade and trade between the UK and the US. That's very positive. But also making sure that we're able to explain what are the problems with the Northern Ireland Protocol. What is it we want to see in terms of finding a way through this? We want to get an agreement with the EU, but that does require the EU to show some pragmatism and some flexibility for the benefit of the people of Northern Ireland.
But Biden has more or less said he would veto any deal until there is agreement on the protocol, which presumably would involve agreement by the nationalists as well as the unionists.
Well, a couple of things on that, Trevor. So first of all, to be fair to the president, that's not exactly what he has said. What the US say... Well, no, I'm not sure I'd entirely agree with that. What he has said and what the US have consistently said is they want to see an outcome agreed between the parties and that respects the Good Friday Agreement. That's exactly where the UK government is. You're quite right. This is an important factor. This is something that's got to work for the whole community of Northern Ireland, both the nationalist community and the unionist community. That's what we want to achieve. And let's also be very clear, what often gets missed in this discussion is the problems with the protocol affect all of the community in Northern Ireland. Michelle O'Neill, who was Deputy First Minister, the lead Sinn Féin representative in Northern Ireland, herself has said there are problems with the protocol we want to get resolved. So this is not just an issue for unionism. If you can't get access to the products you need to get access to as a consumer or as a business in Northern Ireland, which is currently the case, that affects everybody. And that's why we're seeing one of the examples of this is the problems the Jewish community are having. So this is not just something about unionism. This is something we need to resolve for everybody in Northern Ireland.
By the way, you've wrote an article on Friday which basically said, challenge the unionists to accept that if elections in May result in a situation where the First Minister is from Sinn Féin, that they would accept the post of Deputy First Minister. What are you going to do if they say no? Because they haven't given you any reassurances, have they?
Well, none of them are giving assurances about anything in the head of the elections. I think the very quote that politicians in Northern Ireland have given is they're not commenting on what the outcome of an election may be before an election. As a politician, I understand that. But look, I'll be very clear about this. As I was last summer when Sinn Féin were trying to bring down the executive, I don't think the people of Northern Ireland want to tolerate or are happy with anybody threatening the institutions of Stormont. That is part of the Good Friday Agreement. It's how we ensure we have good government in Northern Ireland, that devolved authority to deliver on the issues like health and education that need so much reform and work in Northern Ireland. We'll support the executive to do that. We want to see a functioning executive, all the parties working together to do that.
All right. Now, on Friday evening, Prime Minister received a questionnaire from Metropolitan Police on his alleged involvement in many parties that took place in Downing Street. Now, you just talked about the important issues that face people in Northern Ireland, face people all over this country, and most people would say that every second of the Prime Minister's attention should be on those big issues: energy, the Ukraine, the crisis in the health service, the economy. But it won't be while he's answering questionnaires. How much longer are you going to let this go on?
Well, obviously, the investigation into this is a matter for the police. I'm not going to put timeframes on them. They've got to be able to do their job independently, autonomously, and see that through. We've all been very clear about that. But I have to say, in the dealings I've had with the Prime Minister, he is absolutely focused on the job in hand, about what he's doing for the British people, whether it's on the conversations I've had with him on Northern Ireland, be it the protocol or the situation with the executive. And I know from cabinet meetings, I attended most of the cabinet meeting last week before I flew to the US, his work and his focus on our health service and, as you say, on the issues with Russia and the Ukraine.
Yeah, but as far as I know, Prime Minister's human, and it would be ridiculous to imagine that he's not thinking about that. As Ian Duncan Smith says in one of the papers this morning, I'm paraphrasing here, that if he is fined by the police, he is toast and he has to go. Well,
I haven't seen Ian's comments this morning, but I have to say what I have seen is a Prime Minister who is absolutely focused and dedicated to working on the issues that are affecting people across the United Kingdom, whether it's the cost of living, whether it's the issues, as I say, with Russia, and obviously in my portfolio, the issues with Northern Ireland. He is somebody who is absolutely focused on that. He works day and night to make sure that we are delivering a country that becomes even better for people.
So he's paying no attention to the fact that a former Prime Minister, John Major, says he had shredded the UK's reputation. Another former Prime Minister, Theresa May, said public had a right to expect their Prime Minister to have read the rules, understand the meaning of the rules and set an example by following the rules. Are all those people wrong, and is he not even bothered about that?
No, he will actually be very, very focused on the issues that matter to all of us. And look, we are talking about a Prime Minister as Foreign Secretary worked to bring the world together when we had the Skripal situation, we've got a Prime Minister who is now bringing the world together in terms of how we deal with Russia and Ukraine. He's working within this country about dealing with this COVID after problem that we've got, the crisis we're seeing in the health service, dealing with the backlog of that, dealing with the issues that people care about, our energy costs. They're what he's focused on, and that's absolutely right where he should be focused on, because that's what makes our country better.
Well, look, let me give one last go at this. And this is really a question to you and your colleagues rather than the Prime Minister. You came into politics to support the Conservative cause, national sovereignty, lower taxes, all freedom of the individual, all of that. Every Sunday, you and your colleagues have to come out and to try to explain what the Prime Minister's socialising means. Is there any point for you at which the great cause of Disraeli and Churchill and Thatcher becomes more important than loyalty to this Prime Minister?
Well, I always enjoy coming to talk to you on a Sunday, Trevor, and your colleagues across the media. So I would always be happy to come out and,
we're fun
and
people,
do that.
We're fun people, I know. But honestly, the reality which you have to say, can't do this is killing the cause I came into politics for.
Trevor, as I said in a conversation I had with somebody at the end of last week, look, I feel very, very fortunate to be to be honoured enough to be in a position to serve in the cabinet. I've served as a government minister under 3 prime ministers. When you're asked by prime ministers to serve your country, I think it's an honour to be able to do that. And my focus is and always has been on what we're doing for the people of our country, what I do for the people of my constituency, and in this role, obviously, the people of Northern Ireland. I think it's right that we're focused on that. And I have to say, as I said to you a few moments ago, my experience is that's what the Prime Minister's focused on, and that's why he has my absolute 100% plus loyalty. Look, I think this is a Prime Minister who's doing the right things for our country. He's got the big decisions right. I think he'll fight and he will win as a result of that in the next general election.
All right, well, let's deal with a couple of the real-world problems you're facing. I mean, this week, the resignation of Cressida Dick, Commission of the Met, appears to have taken the government by surprise. And for you, it must be somewhat alarming because she's one of the key people in the fight against terrorism, which is a big priority for you. MI5 says that the national threat level from terrorism is substantial and Northern Ireland-related threat level is severe. For your point of view, how quickly does a new commissioner have to be in place? Well,
look, first, just as a matter of fact, I think it's just important to make the point, obviously, the policing of terrorism in Northern Ireland is dealt separately. That's a matter for the PSNI working with partners in Northern Ireland rather than the Metropolitan Police. But all of the police forces work together. And obviously, as an ex-security minister, the importance of the Met's role, their national role in counter-terrorism is hugely important. And the teams who do that work, that I've always said I think are the best in the world. They're absolutely phenomenal. It is obviously important that we give them the stability of having their leadership dealt with as quickly as possible. I know that's something that the Home Secretary will be focused on doing, but it's right that we give the space for the Home Secretary and obviously consulting with the Mayor and others to make sure we get the right person for that job. But the Home Secretary will be dealing with that very soon.
It's being reported by some newspapers that the Home Secretary would like to essentially cut the Mayor out of that decision-making. Can you confirm or tell us whether that is true or not?
Well, as far as I'm aware, that's just rumours. I think it's always best to avoid getting involved with rumours. I think the Commissioner ultimately is working with and for the Mayor. That's obviously what's led to the decision. The rather odd decision in some ways, because as you rightly say, the Mayor just a few months ago extended Cressida Dick's tenure as the Commissioner for London. But look, the focus will be on getting the right person to succeed Cressida Dick, to take the Metropolitan Police forward, to put in the reforms that we all need to see and deal with some of the issues that the Met has faced recently, and to continue ensuring that the Met can grow to be and do the work it does, particularly in some of those sensitive national areas, as one of the best, if not arguably the best in the world.
In the end, does the government think that the Mayor's decision was a good one? Was he right? Was he right to withdraw his confidence?
Well, I say I don't know the details of why Sadiq Khan, having just very recently extended Cressida Dick's tenure, suddenly decided to withdraw his confidence in her. I absolutely respect Cressida's decision based on the conversation we had with him. That's a decision she's had to make. I think the focus has to now be on the fact that we want to see the Met moving forward. There is work to do. It's a big organisation, the largest police force in the United Kingdom, and to get the leadership in there, that means it can go forward and continue to develop and change as it needs to deal with the issues it's had, but also to deal with the issues of policing on both the national and the London scale that the Met has to deal with in the years ahead.